Unstoppable justice, the blind cop defying all odds. The city of Caledon was infamous for its shadowy alleys, corrupt officials, and a criminal underworld that seemed untouchable. The people had given up hope until Inspector Oriv Call arrived. But Oriv wasn't like any other cop. 5 years ago, an explosion orchestrated by a criminal syndicate had robbed him of his sight. The accident that could have ended his career only made him more determined. Against all odds, Oriv trained himself, developing heightened senses and learning to navigate the world through sound, smell, and instinct. When Oriv returned to duty, skepticism surrounded him. Some mocked the idea of a blind cop. Others pitied him. But Oriv didn't care for their doubts. He wasn't just back, he was on a mission to bring the syndicate that blinded him to justice. Oriv's sharp mind and unwavering resolve made him a force to be reckoned with. He relied on a combination of advanced technology and his enhanced senses. A modified earpiece fed him real-time information, and his walking cane concealed a GPS tracker, stun device, and a recorder. His partner, Officer Maya Sen, served as his eyes in the field, though she quickly realized Oriv often saw far more than she did. One evening, Oriv and Maya were called to the scene of a brutal murder. The victim was a whistleblower who had been on the verge of exposing the infamous Don Rogov Malhotra. The crime scene was spotless, but Oriv's acute sense of smell detected a faint trace of cigar smoke, an unusual scent for the area. Rogov's signature cigars, Oriv murmured. Over the next few weeks, Oriv and Maya began dismantling the syndicate, one piece at a time. Oriv's interrogation techniques were legendary. He could hear lies in the hesitation of a breath or the quickening of a heartbeat. Witnesses who feared reprisal found an unshakable ally in him. But Rogov wasn't one to go down without a fight. The syndicate began targeting Oriv, sending threats and even attempting an ambush. It was during one of these attacks that Oriv's resilience truly shone. Trapped in a dark warehouse, surrounded by armed goons, Oriv turned the darkness into his ally. "Darkness isn't my weakness," he said, his voice calm. "It's my advantage." Using his heightened hearing and a mental map of the warehouse, Oriv moved like a ghost, disarming and incapacitating the criminals one by one. By the time reinforcements arrived, Oriv stood alone amidst a pile of unconscious bodies, his cane in hand. The final showdown with Rogov was a battle of wits and will. Oriv tracked him to a luxurious mansion on the city's outskirts. Armed with evidence collected over months, Oriv and Maya orchestrated a raid. Rogov, arrogant and overconfident, underestimated the blind cop. "You think you can take me down?" Rogov sneered. "I don't think," Oriv replied. "I know." The raid ended with Rogov in handcuffs and his empire in ruins. Oriv handed over the evidence to the press, ensuring that Rogov's corruption would be exposed far and wide. As Caledon began to heal, Oriv became a symbol of hope and resilience. His story inspired people to believe that justice was possible, no matter the odds. "Justice isn't about what you can see," Oriv once said in an interview. "It's about what you refuse to ignore." And so, Inspector Oriv Call continued his work, proving that even in the darkest of times, justice could never be blind. The city of Caledon had finally begun to heal. The streets, once haunted by crime, were now quieter, safer. Inspector Oriv Call had become a local legend, the blind cop who had taken down the untouchable criminal kingpin, Rogov Malhotra. Yet, even as the city rested, Oriv knew the fight wasn't over. Late one night, as Oriv sat in his modest apartment, a faint tapping on his window drew his attention. It was Maya Sen, his trusted partner. Her voice carried an urgency that Oriv hadn't heard in months. "They've regrouped," she said, sliding a file onto his desk. Oriv ran his fingers over the braille notes she had prepared for him. The remnants of Rogov's syndicate, led by a shadowy figure known only as the Whisper, were resurfacing. Unlike Rogov, the Whisper was cunning and elusive, known for leaving no trace and using fear as their greatest weapon. "They've already started," Maya continued. "2 witnesses from Rogov's case have vanished. No bodies. No evidence. Just, gone." Oriv's jaw tightened. The Whisper thinks they can silence justice. Let's prove them wrong. The next few days were grueling. Oriv and Maya followed every lead, but each one ended in dead ends, empty warehouses, abandoned hideouts, trails that seemed deliberately planted to mislead them. Oriv's frustration grew, but so did his determination. One night, while reviewing recordings from an old Rogov case, Oriv noticed something strange, a faint sound in the background of a phone call. A series of beeps, almost imperceptible. "Maya, enhance this," Oriv said. When the sound was amplified, it revealed itself to be Morse code. The message was chilling: "Blind justice will fall." "They're mocking you," Maya said, her voice tense. "No," Oriv replied. "They're challenging me." The message led them to an abandoned shipyard on the city's outskirts. Oriv insisted on going alone, sensing it was a trap but unwilling to risk anyone else's safety. The air was thick with salt and silence as Oriv navigated the maze of rusted containers, his cane tapping rhythmically against the ground. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the darkness. "Impressive, Inspector Call," it said, smooth and cold. "You've come far, but this is where your journey ends." Oriv paused, tilting his head slightly. He could hear footsteps, soft, deliberate, circling him. He smirked. "You think I need sight to find you?" Oriv called out. The whisper laughed. "Let's see how long that confidence lasts." The sound of footsteps multiplied as armed henchmen emerged from the shadows. Oriv tightened his grip on his cane, activating the stun device hidden within it. "You're surrounded," the whisper taunted. "Am I?" Oriv replied, a faint smile crossing his lips. Unbeknownst to the criminals, Oriv had been mapping the area through sound, tracking every move. In one swift motion, he disabled the first assailant with his cane, ducking as another swung a weapon at him. Oriv moved like a shadow, using the darkness to his advantage. The whisper, watching from a distance, realized too late that Oriv wasn't fighting alone. Maya and a tactical team stormed the shipyard, their timing orchestrated by Oriv's covert signals. As chaos erupted, Oriv honed in on the whisper, who tried to flee. But Oriv's heightened senses betrayed the criminal's every step. "You thought you could silence me," Oriv said, cornering the whisper. "But justice doesn't fall. It rises." With a final strike, Oriv subdued the whisper, unmasking the elusive figure. The face that stared back at him was one he didn't expect, a high-ranking government official, someone who had been pulling the strings from the start. As the tactical team secured the area, Maya approached Oriv. "Another victory," she said, smiling. "Not a victory," Oriv replied. "Just another step forward. Caledon was safe once. More, but Oriv knew the fight would never truly end. And he was ready for whatever came next." The city's shadows were growing darker. Though the whisper had been unmasked and captured, Oriv couldn't shake the feeling that something even larger was brewing, something beyond what even he had anticipated. As he walked through the quiet streets of Caledon, his cane tapping rhythmically, Oriv paused, sensing the shift in the air. His instincts told him the fight was far from over. Back at the station, Maya handed him another file. "This just came in," she said gravely. Oriv felt the weight of her voice more than her words. "What is it?" Oriv asked, flipping through the braille notes. "A name," Maya replied. "Someone called the architect. Rumor is, they were the mastermind behind both Rogov and the whisper." Oriv's expression hardened. The pieces of a larger puzzle were beginning to fall into place, and this time, the stakes felt higher than ever. He gripped his cane tighter. "Then it's time to finish this." The city of Caledon was teetering on the edge of chaos, and Oriv Call could feel it in every breath of the cold night air. The architect's reach was vast, their plans meticulous. Every step Oriv took felt like he was chasing shadows, but he knew one thing for certain: this enemy wouldn't stop until the city was theirs. A coded message intercepted by Maya revealed the architect's next move, a planned blackout across Caledon, plunging the city into darkness, both literal and metaphorical. The blackout would create the perfect cover for their ultimate goal: total control over the city's financial systems, transportation networks, and law enforcement. "This isn't just a crime," Maya said as they studied the decoded file in the precinct's dimly lit briefing room. "This is a hostile takeover." Oriv tilted his head, listening to the faint hum of the overhead lights as his mind pieced together the puzzle. "Darkness is their weapon," he said quietly, gripping his cane. But darkness is where I thrive. The countdown to the blackout began, and Oriv and Maya worked tirelessly to pinpoint the architect's location. It led them to an underground data hub, a sprawling labyrinth of wires, servers, and armed guards deep beneath the city. As the city lights began to flicker, Oriv and Maya descended into the heart of the operation. The air was thick with tension and the hum of machinery. Oriv moved with purpose, his senses heightened to the vibrations of footsteps, the faint click of weapons being readied, and the rhythm of his own heartbeat. "This is where it ends," he whispered, gripping Maya's arm briefly before moving forward. But the architect was waiting. "Well, Inspector Call," a voice boomed over the intercom, smooth and calculated. "You've finally made it. Let's see if you can outsmart the inevitable." The lights went out. The city plunged into total darkness, and chaos erupted above ground. Oriv stood still, a faint smirk crossing his face. "You're right about one thing," Oriv said, his voice steady. "This is inevitable. But it's not me who should be afraid of the dark." With the city in chaos and the architect's plan in motion, Oriv and Maya pushed forward into the heart of the labyrinth. But the architect was always one step ahead, and the closer they got, the more dangerous the game became. The darkness in Caledon was absolute. Above ground, the city descended into chaos, traffic lights failed, security systems shut down, and panic spread like wildfire. But below the surface, Oriv Call and Maya Sen pressed forward through the labyrinthine data hub, guided only by Oriv's heightened senses and unshakable resolve. The architect's voice echoed through hidden speakers. "You're impressive, Inspector Call. A blind man chasing a ghost. But you've already lost. The city is mine now." Oriv paused, tilting his head to listen to the faintest sounds around him, the distant hum of servers, the soft scuffle of boots on metal flooring, the irregular rhythm of someone breathing too heavily. "She's close," Oriv muttered to Maya. "2 levels below. That's where they're controlling everything." Maya nodded, her flashlight cutting through the dark. "Then we end this now." As they descended deeper, the air grew colder, and the tension thicker. Armed guards patrolled the corridors, their flashlights creating moving beams in the oppressive blackness. Oriv gestured for Maya to stay behind him, his cane tapping softly against the ground as he mapped the space in his mind. One guard rounded a corner, his footsteps too loud for Oriv to miss. Oriv stepped into the shadows, waiting until the man passed before disarming him with swift precision. The guard dropped silently, and Oriv motioned for Maya to follow. When they finally reached the control room, the door was locked with a biometric scanner. Maya cursed under her breath. "How do we get through this?" Oriv smirked. "Simple. We make them open it for us." With calculated precision, Oriv triggered a silent alarm in one of the nearby server rooms. Moments later, 2 guards arrived to investigate. Oriv and Maya ambushed them, using their access to bypass the scanner. Inside the control room, the glow of monitors illuminated a figure standing at the center, a tall woman in a sleek black suit, her sharp features partially hidden by the flickering screens. "The infamous architect," Oriv said calmly, stepping forward. The woman turned, her piercing eyes locking onto Oriv. "Inspector Call. I've heard so much about you. But this is where your journey ends." As she spoke, the sound of doors locking behind them sent a chill down Maya's spine. The architect had activated a trap. Poisonous gas began to seep into the room. "Always 2 steps ahead," the architect said with a smirk. But Oriv remained unfazed. "You underestimated me. That was your first mistake." In a single motion, Oriv threw his modified cane toward the control panel, triggering an electromagnetic pulse. The monitors sparked and went dark, and the gas vents ceased their deadly release. The architect's composure faltered as Maya moved in to cuff her. Oriv turned his head slightly, sensing her attempt to reach for a concealed weapon. "Don't," he warned, his voice cold. Defeated, the architect smirked. "You've won this round, Call. But you can't stop what's coming." Maya frowned. "What do you mean?" The architect leaned in, her voice a whisper. "This city is just the beginning. There's a larger plan in motion. And you're already too late." As backup arrived to secure the area, Oriv stood still, processing her words. The architect had been captured, but her warning lingered like a storm cloud. Outside, as the lights of Caledon slowly flickered back to life, Oriv and Maya stepped into the cold night air. "This isn't over, is it?" Maya asked. "No," Oriv replied, his jaw tightening. "This was just the first chapter. Whatever's coming, we'll be ready." The architect's warning hung heavy in the air. Oriv Kall stood in the dim light of the recovering city, his mind racing. The architect was in custody, but her words carried a weight that couldn't be ignored. This city is just the beginning. There's a larger plan in motion. Back at the precinct, Oriv and Maya pored over the evidence collected from the data hub. The architect's network was vast, and while many of the files were corrupted or encrypted, one fragment stood out: a series of coordinates. "These aren't in Caledon," Maya said, frowning as she traced the locations on a map. "They're spread across different cities, even countries." Oriv ran his fingers over the braille printout Maya had prepared. "It's a global operation," he murmured. The architect wasn't just working alone. She's part of something bigger. As they worked through the night, a coded message suddenly appeared on Maya's computer. The screen flashed red, the text ominous. "You've made a mistake, Inspector. Caledon was just the beginning. You can't stop the storm." Oriv leaned closer, his brow furrowed. "They know we're onto them. Whoever's behind this isn't going to wait for us to act." The next morning, Oriv and Maya received word that the architect had been moved to a high-security facility. But en route, the convoy was ambushed. By the time reinforcements arrived, the vehicles were destroyed, and the architect was gone. "This wasn't a rescue," Oriv said, inspecting the crime scene later. "They didn't come to save her. They came to silence her." Maya looked uneasy. "So, what now?" Oriv's grip on his cane tightened. "We find the others. If the architect was part of a larger plan, there are more like her out there. And we stop them before they bring the city or the world to its knees." As they returned to the precinct, Maya glanced at Oriv. "You're not afraid of what we might uncover, are you?" Oriv turned his head slightly, a faint smirk on his face. "I've already faced the dark. Whatever's coming, I'll face it again." Far away, in a hidden location, a group of shadowy figures gathered around a table. Screens displayed global maps, encrypted files, and live feeds from cities around the world. A voice broke the silence. "Inspector Kall has become a problem. He's not like the others." Another figure, shrouded in shadows, leaned forward. "Then it's time we deal with him personally. Send the message. The game begins now." Back in Caledon, Oriv felt the weight of what was coming but knew one thing for sure: he wouldn't stop until justice prevailed. The tension in Caledon was palpable as Oriv Kall and Maya Sen returned to the precinct. The message from the shadowy organization lingered in their minds like an unshakable storm cloud. Oriv could feel it: something larger, darker, and far more dangerous than the architect was on the horizon. Maya placed a fresh stack of documents on the table, her brow furrowed. "I cross-referenced the coordinates from the architect's files with recent incidents. These locations match major disruptions, power grid failures, cyber attacks, even unexplained disappearances. This isn't just crime, Oriv. It's organized chaos." Oriv ran his fingers across the braille notes she'd prepared. "They're testing the limits. Caledon was a prototype. Whatever comes next will be bigger, faster, and deadlier." Before Maya could respond, an officer burst into the room. "Inspector, there's something you need to see." In the main operations room, the team had intercepted a live feed broadcasting across the dark web. On the screen was a masked figure, their distorted voice booming through the speakers. "To the people of Caledon, and beyond, you believe the nightmare is over. You believe in the strength of your so-called heroes. But your justice is blind, and your protectors are powerless. The storm is coming, and it will consume you all." The feed cut out, leaving the room in silence. Oriv's jaw tightened as he turned to Maya. "They're not just taunting us. They're declaring war." Moments later, an alert blared across the precinct. A coordinated series of attacks had begun across the city: banks were being hacked, power stations sabotaged, and emergency services overwhelmed. "They're dismantling the city piece by piece," Maya said, gripping her radio. Oriv stood, his calm demeanor masking the storm inside. Then we stop them piece by piece. As the chaos unfolded, Oriv and Maya split up to lead efforts on multiple fronts. Oriv, with his heightened senses and tactical precision, infiltrated a compromised power station, neutralizing a group of saboteurs operating in total darkness. Meanwhile, Maya coordinated efforts to secure the banks, working alongside the cybercrime unit to counter the digital attacks. Her voice crackled through Oriv's earpiece. The architect wasn't exaggerating. This is bigger than anything we've ever faced. Back at the precinct, Oriv pieced together fragments of intel gathered during the attacks. Each clue led to a chilling conclusion: the attacks were a distraction. The true objective was still in motion. Late that night, Oriv received an anonymous package at the precinct. Inside was a simple note. "You're running out of time. Look beneath the city, and you'll find the truth." Oriv's fingers tightened around the note as Maya read it aloud. "What does it mean?" she asked. "It means," Oriv said, his voice low, "this isn't about Caladan anymore. It's about everything beneath it, its systems, its secrets, and the people who've stayed hidden in the shadows for too long." The game had changed, and Oriv Call was ready to face it. The message was clear, but its implications were far more sinister than Oriv Call wanted to admit. Beneath the city of Caladan, hidden in its forgotten tunnels and infrastructure, lay the key to understanding the enemy's master plan. Oriv stood in the precinct's operations room, the note clutched in his hand. Maya leaned over the map they'd spread across the table. "If they're telling us to look beneath the city, then they're either trying to lead us into a trap or they're taunting us. Either way, we can't ignore it." Oriv nodded, his fingers tracing the lines of the city's underground network. These tunnels were used decades ago, during Caladan's industrial expansion. Most of them were abandoned after the new infrastructure was built. Maya frowned. Abandoned, or repurposed. Later that night, Oriv and Maya descended into the depths of the city. Armed with only minimal backup to avoid drawing attention, they entered through a long-forgotten maintenance hatch. The air was damp, the walls lined with rust and decay, but Oriv moved with precision, his cane tapping softly against the uneven ground. The deeper they went, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. Strange noises echoed through the tunnels, distant whispers, the hum of machinery, and the faint sound of dripping water. "This place shouldn't have power," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It shouldn't have guards either," Oriv replied, his head tilting as he picked up the faint shuffle of footsteps ahead. In the shadows, armed figures patrolled the tunnels. Oriv and Maya moved silently, evading detection until they reached a large, reinforced door. The hum of machinery was louder here, and Oriv could feel the vibrations through his cane. "This is it," he said, his voice steady. Maya worked quickly, bypassing the electronic lock while Oriv kept watch. The door hissed open, revealing a sprawling underground facility filled with servers, weapons stockpiles, and a small army of operatives. At the center of it all was a massive holographic display of Caladan, its infrastructure mapped out in glowing red lines. "They're targeting the city's foundations," Maya whispered. "This isn't just about chaos. They're planning to collapse everything: power grids, water supplies, communications, all at once." Oriv's jaw tightened. "They're not just dismantling Caladan. They're turning it into an example." As they surveyed the facility, an alarm suddenly blared. Their presence had been detected. Operatives swarmed the area, weapons drawn, and the room plunged into chaos. "Get the data," Oriv shouted to Maya as he moved to intercept the guards. His movements were fluid and precise, using the darkness to his advantage. Every strike was calculated, every step purposeful. Maya worked frantically to extract information from the servers, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "I've got it," she yelled, just as more guards stormed in. "We need to move," Oriv called out, disabling the last of the operatives blocking their path. Together, they fought their way back through the tunnels, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. When they finally emerged into the night, Maya clutched a hard drive containing the stolen data. "We have what we need," she said, catching her breath. Oriv nodded, his face grim. "But this is just the beginning. Whoever's behind this won't stop. And now, they know we're coming for them." As they returned to the precinct, Maya plugged the hard drive into their secure system. The files revealed something chilling, a list of cities worldwide, each one marked with the same red lines they'd seen in the holographic display. This isn't just about Caledon, Maya said, her voice shaking. This is global. Oriv stood silently for a moment, the weight of the revelation settling over him. Then, with quiet determination, he spoke. Then we don't just fight for Caledon. We fight for everyone. The weight of the global conspiracy hung over Oriv and Maya like a storm cloud. The files they had uncovered were only the beginning, a fragmented glimpse into a vast network orchestrating destruction on a scale far beyond anything they had imagined. Oriv leaned over the map, his fingers tracing the red lines of cities marked for destabilization. They've planned this for years. Caledon was just a test run. Now they're going after the heart of the world's infrastructure. Maya nodded grimly. And they're always one step ahead. We need to move fast, or we'll lose more than just Caledon. As they worked to decipher the next wave of attacks, an encrypted message arrived. Oriv's hand tightened around his cane as he listened to the voice on the other end. You think you've won, Inspector. You think you can stop us. But there are thousands of pieces to this puzzle. And you've only found one. The line went dead, and Oriv's heart sank. The game had changed again. The architect had been a key piece, but there were others just as dangerous, just as brilliant, operating in the shadows. This is bigger than we thought, Maya said, her voice low. There are more players in this game than we realized. Oriv stood tall, his jaw set. Then we find them. One by one. But their next lead came from an unexpected source. An anonymous whistleblower, someone who had been inside the operation, reached out with crucial information. The message was simple. The storm is coming, and you don't know who's behind it. Oriv and Maya met with the whistleblower in a hidden location, a cramped alley in the heart of the city. The man, gaunt and nervous, handed over a flash drive. Everything you need is on here. But be careful. The ones you think are your allies aren't who they seem to be. Before Oriv could respond, the sound of approaching sirens cut through the night. The whistleblower turned and ran, disappearing into the shadows. Oriv knew it was a trap. Maya, get the drive to the safe house. I'll cover you. As they moved quickly through the alley, a group of armed men appeared from the shadows. Oriv's instincts kicked in. He moved like lightning, taking down one assailant after another with calculated precision. But even as they fought their way through, Oriv could feel the walls closing in. Maya reached the safe house, breathless, but as she turned back to check on Oriv, the street exploded in a blinding flash of light. Oriv was thrown to the ground, disoriented, his hearing temporarily gone. He forced himself to his feet, hearing the faint sounds of approaching footsteps. The world around him was spinning, but he didn't have time to recover. Not now. As he staggered toward Maya, the realization hit him hard. They were waiting for him. Waiting for them both. The game had moved into its most dangerous phase. And this time, they weren't playing by the rules. The flash of light had left Oriv dazed, but his instincts never wavered. The sound of approaching footsteps, the stench of smoke, the weight of the situation pressing down on him, all of it sharpened his focus. He had been caught in the trap, but he wasn't going to be its victim. Struggling to steady himself, Oriv staggered toward the safe house. His senses were assaulted by the disorienting sounds and smells of the aftermath, crackling fire, distant sirens, and the sharp scent of gunpowder. Maya was already waiting by the door, eyes wide with panic. Oriv, what the hell just happened? Oriv's grip tightened around his cane, his senses still struggling to realign. A bomb, he muttered. But it's not over. They're expecting us to be rattled. We move now, or we'll be caught in the next wave. Without waiting for a response, he led the way down a back alley, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the chaotic noise around them. Maya kept pace, glancing nervously over her shoulder. This isn't just about us anymore. Oriv's eyes narrowed. Then we make them think they do. They needed answers, and they needed them fast. The flash drive from the whistleblower held the key to the next step in the puzzle, and Oriv was determined to unravel it before the storm hit. Back at their secure location, Maya plugged the drive into the encrypted system. The files on the drive were more than just operational plans, they were the blueprints for a global network, a spider's web of influence and power that stretched from Caledon to every corner of the world. These aren't just attackers, Maya said as she scrolled through the data. This is an organization with global reach. They have governments, corporations, military contractors, even private individuals in their pocket. They've been pulling strings for decades, orchestrating crises to push their own agenda. Oriv's fingers clenched into fists. This is the storm they've been talking about. It's not just about destabilizing cities. It's about shifting the entire balance of power. Suddenly, a chilling realization gripped him. And we've been playing right into their hands. The door to the safe house burst open, and Oriv instinctively lunged for cover. Armed men poured into the room, their faces hidden behind masks. Maya's hand flew to her sidearm, but Oriv raised a hand to stop her. "No," he whispered. "They want us alive. For now." One of the masked figures stepped forward, their voice distorted by a modulator. "Inspector Call, Maya Sen. You've done well to get this far. But it ends here." Oriv stood, facing the masked figure with unshaken resolve. "You think you've won? You think you can control the world like puppeteers?" The figure chuckled, low and dangerous. "Control is an illusion, Inspector. We've only been guiding it toward its natural conclusion. You, Maya, all of you, are nothing more than the final pieces in a game that has been in motion for years." Maya's eyes flashed with defiance. "You're wrong. The game isn't over. And we're not your pawns. Whoever's behind this knows how to play the game. They have eyes everywhere." Oriv's eyes narrowed. "Then we make them think they do." They needed answers, and they needed them fast. The flash drive from the whistleblower held the key to the next step in the puzzle, and Oriv was determined to unravel it before the storm hit. Back at their secure location, Maya plugged the drive into the encrypted system. The files on the drive were more than just operational plans, they were the blueprints for a global network, a spider's web of influence and power that stretched from Caledon to every corner of the world. "These aren't just attackers," Maya said as she scrolled through the data. "This is an organization with global reach. They have governments, corporations, military contractors, even private individuals in their pocket. They've been pulling strings for decades, orchestrating crises to push their own agenda." Oriv's fingers clenched into fists. This is the storm they've been talking about. It's not just about destabilizing cities. It's about shifting the entire balance of power. Suddenly, a chilling realization gripped him. And we've been playing right into their hands. The door to the safe house burst open, and Oriv instinctively lunged for cover. Armed men poured into the room, their faces hidden behind masks. Maya's hand flew to her sidearm, but Oriv raised a hand to stop her. "No," he whispered. "They want us alive. For now." One of the masked figures stepped forward, their voice distorted by a modulator. "Inspector Call, Maya Sen. You've done well to get this far. But it ends here." Oriv stood, facing the masked figure with unshaken resolve. "You think you've won? You think you can control the world like puppeteers?" The figure chuckled, low and dangerous. "Control is an illusion, Inspector. We've only been guiding it toward its natural conclusion. You, Maya, all of you, are nothing more than the final pieces in a game that has been in motion for years." Maya's eyes flashed with defiance. "You're wrong. The game isn't over. And we're not your pawns." For a moment, the figure seemed to hesitate. Then, with a cold smile, they gestured to their men. "Take them." But as the operatives advanced, Oriv's senses flared to life. The movement of their feet, the subtle shift of their bodies, they were outnumbered, but not outmatched. With a swift motion, Oriv disabled the first guard, using his cane to deflect an incoming strike and disarm another. Maya followed suit, her training and quick reflexes allowing her to incapacitate the remaining assailants. The room fell silent, save for the heavy breathing of the two survivors. Oriv turned to face the masked figure, who had remained eerily calm throughout the chaos. "You want us to stop. But I've got news for you. We won't stop until we tear down everything you've built." The figure's smile faded, replaced by cold calculation. "You're too late. The storm is already in motion." As they fled the safe house, Oriv and Maya knew one thing. The The battle wasn't just about saving Caledon anymore. It was about stopping a global disaster, and they were running out of time. The clock was ticking. Oriv and Maya knew they were running on borrowed time, and the storm was already upon them. They had learned the hard truth. They were up against something far larger, far more insidious than anything they had ever faced. This wasn't just a battle for one city, it was a fight for the entire world. As they raced through the streets of Caledon, the city itself felt like a ticking bomb. The infrastructure was already crumbling, the shadows of their enemies closing in. Every move they made, every piece of evidence they uncovered, only led them deeper into the heart of a global conspiracy. The architect, the shadowy figures, and the mysterious forces manipulating them, none of it had been by accident. They were all part of a carefully orchestrated plan to collapse the world's power structures and rebuild them in a way that served an unseen few. Their final confrontation was inevitable. The encrypted files they had gathered pointed to a central hub, a secure facility hidden deep in the heart of a remote location. There, the masterminds behind the chaos were waiting. They had thought they could manipulate Oriv and Maya into playing their parts, but they had underestimated one thing: the resolve of two people who had nothing left to lose. In the final standoff, as the rain poured down in sheets and the winds howled around them, Oriv stood at the gates of the facility, his cane in hand and his heart steeled for the battle ahead. Maya stood beside him, her eyes fierce with determination. "Whatever happens next, we finish this," Oriv said, his voice calm but resolute. Maya nodded. Together, they breached the facility, cutting through the darkness with unflinching resolve. As they advanced, they encountered the remnants of the organization's forces, guard after guard, each one falling before Oriv's precise movements, each one rendered helpless by his heightened senses and Maya's sharpshooting. Every corner, every shadow, was an opportunity to strike, and they used every advantage they had learned in the months of fighting back. Finally, they reached the heart of the facility. The mastermind behind the operation, a shadowy figure who had remained hidden throughout the chaos, stood before them, his back to a massive screen that displayed a global map. The red lines that had once marked Caledon now spread across continents, and the storm they had warned of was more real than ever. "You're too late," the figure said, his voice cold and distant. "The plan is already in motion. The world will fall, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Oriv took a step forward, his cane clicking softly on the floor. "You underestimate us. You think the world will crumble, but it's not your plan that will win. It's the people, the ones who fight, who stand against darkness, who refuse to let fear control them." Maya stepped up beside him, her voice unwavering. "You built this web of lies, but you forgot one thing: people like us. We'll tear it down, piece by piece." The mastermind laughed, but there was a hint of doubt in his eyes. "You're out of your depth. The storm is already here." But Oriv's words were calm and firm. "Then let it come. But know this, it won't be your storm. It'll be ours. And we'll weather it." With that, Oriv and Maya made their final move. In a flurry of action, they dismantled the network controlling the facility, shutting down the servers, and destroying the key data that had driven the conspiracy. The mastermind's face twisted in anger and frustration as everything they had worked for came crashing down. As the building began to collapse around them, Oriv and Maya made their escape. The storm, they realized, was not just a threat, it was a metaphor. The world had been thrown into chaos, but it was in the midst of that chaos that true strength emerged. Back in Caledon, as the city began to recover, Oriv and Maya stood together, watching the dawn break over the skyline. They had fought against impossible odds, and they had won. But they both knew one thing: the fight was never truly over. There would always be another challenge, another battle. And as long as they were standing, they would keep fighting, together. The end.